Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to look through a photo album I discovered at a thrift store at Goodwill, I don't know, about 6 months ago. This is a photo album full of photos. Usually at thrift stores they're empty, but this one is full of photos from China. From China in probably the early 80s. So let's take a look through. Someone just donated let's see, 78. So there is some notes here. Oh, I didn't even notice that. Let's see. These are glossy, so I don't want to. Oh wow! Even so, I lived in China from 2004 to 2015, and they use these cement railroad ties, trains in China. Do I have stories about riding trains in China? Slow trains, fast trains, mega fast trains. Wow. I lived there. I am a full-time musician. I'm a musician. I play bass. So I was working, I was just freelancing as a musician, playing with Chinese pop stars and folk singers and you name it. I mean, I played with Branford Marsalis, Karen Mock. It was awesome. So this, you see the the blue clothing the guys are wearing, that was pretty much everywhere in the early 80s, late 70s. Let's see. This is probably right after Nixon went over, right? I forget the exact year Nixon went over to talk to Mao. Street scene. I like China. I didn't like the authoritarian regime aspect, but I love the cultural aspect. China's ancient. I loved getting lost at antique malls in China and markets, Guan, Shichang. Whenever I flew into a new city for a performance, I would jump in a cab and say, "Ni hao, 我到 Guan Shichang." That means I want to go to an antique mall. And I would end up at some antique market or mall and just look around. Problem is, a lot of the things there are fake. I mean, not a lot. I mean, probably like 98%. So it really helped me train my eye. Wow, look at this. These canals. That looks like Shanghai. Shanghai's got a lot of waterways. Let's see. Guangzhou. So that's not in Pinyin. Guangzhou is near Hong Kong. I've been there before. It's a huge mega city. A lot of tech coming out of Guangzhou. Everyone on their bikes. Look at all the guys wearing the same clothes, same color. When I was there, I would talk to businessmen from Europe and the US who were working in China since the early 80s. And they would tell me things like, in the 80s, if you were a Chinese person and you owned a pair of leather shoes, that was a huge deal. And in the 90s, if you owned a TV set, that was a huge deal. And, in the 90s, in the U.S., I mean, middle class typically had, almost a TV in the living, 3 or 4 TVs, and you thought nothing of it. But, you got to place yourself in certain socioeconomic eras and situations to really make a comparison, to different countries and different ways of life. It was really interesting for me as a 24-year-old person to just move to China, start working there and live there. Let's see. I learned a lot, though, about the world and about myself and government systems. Oh, yeah. Because you read a textbook about socialism or communism or democracy. That's just a textbook definition. It doesn't apply to real life. And that's what a lot of academics like to run to their textbooks. I recommend traveling the world and really experiencing it, and then form your opinion. But that's just me. So let's see here. We have more scenes. We have kids in school singing joyfully. Let's see. So these are all Guangzhou. They speak Cantonese as opposed to Mandarin. Again, it's near Hong Kong. I spent a lot of time in Guangzhou. The food's great. It's hot down there. More school kids. This is 1978. These appear to be an American family vacation to Guangzhou, China. Wow. Now the cool thing is you can still see scenes like this in China. When I was there, you know, in the 20 teens, you would find yourself in various places and you would see scenes like this, people living on boats. There would be fishermen that have a bird, some kind of waterfowl that would be trained to dive in the water, gulp up a big fish, and then jump back on the boat, and it would squeeze it out of his mouth, and the fisherman would have a fish. And I think the bird was even like tied by the leg so it couldn't, you know, get away, sadly. But they were trained, and they would just catch a huge fish, kind of like a pelican. I'm not sure what they are. Like a underwater pelican that would jump off the boat, catch a huge fish, and jump back on the boat, and then barf it up to the fisherman, and it'd still be alive, the fish, and the fisherman would have a fish. It's kind of clever, but I don't know. I saw it with my own eyes. Pretty amazing. And that's been happening for probably thousands of years. China is ancient. When I dealt, you know, I'm an antique dealer, antique and vintage dealer living in the U.S., and in my store, an item has to be 20 years or older to be vintage, or to be vintage. And in my store, an item has to be 100 years or older to be antique. In China, an antique has to be like 1,000 years or older. It's just a completely different thing. It's amazing. Ancient culture. And then, oh well, let's see where this is. I can speak some Chinese. Guilin? Yeah, this is Guilin. This is like bastardized pinyin. I've been to Guilin. I got some stories about Guilin. Holy cow. Wow, look at that. That landscape. Guilin doesn't have a lot of that. It's like otherworldly, these mountains. Wow, look at that. It's like a postcard. Gorgeous. Is Guilin? Yeah. I believe this is where they make Malto, that spirit, that really super strong Chinese alcohol. The sorghum they use. I think it grows around here. Wow. Look at that. These mountains, I remember these mountains. They're rolling. A lot of tourist traps. So if you're traveling in Guilin, be careful. Yeah, I remember seeing these. A lot of tourist traps. I found more tourist traps in the smaller cities as opposed to the bigger cities, because the bigger cities like Shanghai, Beijing, everyone's too busy to paying rent to worry about trying to scam people. But in smaller cities, I found more scams. People trying to trick you. Just be careful. Wow, look at this. This is awesome. I can read a little bit. I can speak way more than I can read as far as the calligraphy. Wow, look at that. There's caves down there, that area. I mean, this is still going on until today. These guys still, still look like that, dress like that. Using old wooden vessels to move goods down the river. Local commerce. I see this kind of stuff in Shanghai. Certain, the certain creeks throughout the city, they move goods, vegetables, lotus root, all kinds of stuff. It's really cool. 1978. This is probably, I'm assuming, an American family's vacation photos to Guiyang and Guilin, Guangzhou, China. 1978. This is found at a thrift store. Yeah, those rolling mountains. These are very, very picturesque. I mean, they look like it's otherworldly. Look at those, how they come to these weird peaks and points. And then we have a guy in the river using the bamboo. 1978. So this is before my time. And I'll tell you, when I was in China, if you're in a big city like Shanghai or Beijing, it's like futurism. It makes New York look like it's antiquated. But if you go like into the country of China, I mean, you still see like aqueducts made of stone, and I mean, water oxen pulling carts. It really changes. It's quite amazing. And I think there's some social issues between the coastal cities that have a ton of money and the folks in the middle of the country that don't. But that's another fish to fry for someone else. I hope you've enjoyed this look through these photos of China in the late 70s. I've always said YouTube is the closest thing we have to a time machine. If we had a real time machine, it would be bad for antique dealers because someone could just go back in time and get all the good stuff and bring it back and resell it, and that would just destroy the prices. So maybe we shouldn't have a time machine. I don't know. But you've been watching my paper time machine, and as always, thanks for checking in.